Thank you very much, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here today to speak with the Snap-on software team about some of the regulation concerns and how AI is floating in the middle of that, sometimes in front of it, sometimes behind it. If we can just present the slides again, that'd be great. You'll see that there's various types of friction that come along with AI, and that friction is really can be categorized into these 6 different areas. There's regulation, friction, large body impacts, new tech, nationalism and ownership, which is coming to the forefront a lot more than it used to be. There's value versus danger for the organization, and certainly there's also supply chain control, which is another one that is perhaps becoming almost as important as the nationalism and ownership. Not just the ownership of the AI application, perhaps, or your data, but just as much where the AI application might get its data and its controls and functionality from. And of course, all of these conflict, as you see on the table in front of you, with a major innovation push. The major innovation push around, people want to move fast. I think everybody feels since the 2023, when ChatGPT really kind of broke the internet, if you will, that the AI movement is for everybody. It feels like you're being left behind. And realistically, that's not the case, but it feels like that. And so there's a tremendous pressure on organizations to move fast. There's a lot of great business cases where people have blown through billions of dollars of tokens, or they've been asked by their CEO to get AI ready and do AI stuff, but absolutely no foundation was put in place to figure out exactly how to do that. And so they want to move fast. And of course, to move fast, you got to experiment, which is the next friction that you see below there. So what you're really seeing is these tenets of trying to move fast, experiment, pilot in an application, pilot outside the application, so on and so forth, are conflicting with major regulatory pulls. The regulation says, no, you can't do that. Or you're afraid that if you move too fast, you implement all this stuff, the regulatory body is going to come back later and say, sorry, that's no longer legal. And now pull it all back, throw it all out, start again, which is equally as daunting as not starting at all. And so these are some of the major regulation concerns we have. And it's funny because every movement of IT creates new common language or new terminology. The millennials might like this more than anyone, but we have some new words, right? Auditability is never like a primary word that anybody used. Explainability is, I'm not even sure that's English, but we all know what that means. Can you explain yourself? Can you tell me, how did the AI come up with this answer? And what data did it use to come up with that answer? And of course, the answer is not even the AI knows. So how can the human know on top of that? And so what you're really seeing is the major things that we count on in regulation for auditability, explainability, consistency is exactly organized differently than what AI is designed to do. So if we can just go to the next slide, please, I'd like to talk a little bit about, what are the framework, what types of frameworks are leading the discussion right now? And I think the EU is a great example of it. It's where you're from, Peter, right? And
yeah.
And the EU is sometimes seen as big bad brother from a regulation perspective. But funny enough, now everyone's turning to the EU to say, hey, can you lead us through this time of very daunting change? And you'll see that the risk levels that the EU AI Act put out there helped everybody at least start with a basic understanding. And of course, at the top end of that is unacceptable risk. And we kind of all know what unacceptable risk is, right? It's not acceptable for the AI to know where me and my kids are at any given time, and to also hold the keys to a weapon system. This is not ever going to be okay. And so you'll see social scoring. Who's a better human being, Peter? Obviously you are, but as long as AI doesn't know that, we're going to be in a better shape. And of course, manipulation of harmful behavior. These are all obvious unacceptable risks. And I like to use a simple example, though, that minimal risk can very quickly become an unacceptable risk. What seems like a minimal risk, the list of all my vendors' addresses seems like a very acceptable risk to add into AI. But did I tell you that I happen to work at a hospital, and that particular list is a list of patients with morbidity, and all of a sudden that changes the nature of that data, doesn't it? And now if I tell you that not only are they have a high morbidity, they also happen to have a high morbidity because they all have Ebola. Well, all of a sudden that data just became unacceptable to go into AI, because now those people will be shunned forever, regardless of whether they recover or not. There's a major push to track them and so on and so forth. Basically, as soon as the data can be weaponized, and of course these days, as we know, we live in a world where a lot of things get weaponized. Just your opinion on AI could get weaponized. This webinar could get weaponized, and so things move from minimal risk to unacceptable risk really, really fast. And it's not just about knowing the framework; it's about understanding what makes something move status in that framework in a bad way.
Yeah. Imagine like a municipal organization, and we want to streamline decision making within the organization, get response to our citizens quicker. Sounds like a great use of AI. What happens if the data and the process is children's data?
Right. It's a extremely simple one, right? What if the child types into or what if the parent types in the AI? I'm trying to get daycare for my child, and the AI misinterprets it and sends a social worker to the house. Yeah, because they're like, oh, parents leaving the child alone. Do you know that once a social worker case is opened, it can never be closed? It is permanently there on the child, on the family and child's record until they're 18. So that's exactly right. Your point is so well taken here. What seems to be a simple modern convenience very quickly turns into a weaponized, unacceptable risk type of friction. And so the AI risk is real, and the way we all navigate it is unique. It's not just a cookie cutter for everyone. Let's take some look at how do we know for our organization, if we must then be our own police, how do we know for our organization that what type of friction we're dealing with, right? First of all, do I have something that can go from minimal to maximal danger? But what is the type of friction, and why does that friction exist even is really interesting to look at. The first one is human friction. And although you see it says resistance from habit, fear, or uncertainty, I will tell you that the biggest one is actually uncertainty. It's uncertainty. For example, if you send me a report, Peter, and I run it through AI and I say, tell me what errors he's made. And it says, oh, Peter made these 3 errors, whether they're quoting errors, whether they're grammatical errors, it doesn't matter. They're errors. And I said, Peter, can you fix your errors? Well, first of all, you're not going to trust that I even necessarily have found the right errors, unless you didn't know if you knew I ran it through AI, obviously. And now I also have reputational risk because I called you out for something that might not have actually been an error. So now I have to check all the work that AI does. Well, all of a sudden the value of that AI got reduced. And so I like to portray it very much like hiring an employee. A lot of managers and leaders, if you ask them, do you want another employee? They're like, no, I don't need someone else that I got to train, ramp, teach every little thing to, watch their work, check them, give them a schedule of tasks. So it's the same human friction that you have for AI. If I give AI a whole bunch of stuff, do I have to monitor it, check it? I mean, I feel like I've doubled my work, and I don't know if I've gotten any value from it.
You wouldn't just give a child a new bicycle ride, would you?
Exactly. And that's really what human friction is about. You need to break down the tasks that the AI gets to be able to reduce that human friction, right? Let's have AI do this thing 20 times. Is everybody comfortable with it? Okay, now we can move on to the next thing. So it's building blocks. And the building block is what helps you get into it. But right now, I just want people to understand there is real friction, both at the human level, the organizational level, and the technical level. And I think a lot of people might understand the technical level, but let me cover the organizational and technical really quickly. Organizational level is really simple. It's very simply, for example, if I have an AI that, let's say, screens resumes and suggests pay bands. If that is in conflict, and the AI gets those pay bands from the internet, but my pay bands in my company are different, well, now I have an organizational friction for adopting that type of AI. There's just a full misalignment. So now I got to train the AI on everything I do in the organization, and will it enforce it every time? So those are the types of organizational frictions you see all the time. Organizations have policies to differentiate themselves from market, but the AI wants to use market information, which it was trained on, to pull you back to the median. And so that's a major organizational friction. And then lastly, the technical friction is very, very real, because AI by nature doesn't know how it built itself. And there's some really good videos on the internet about this type of stuff. We'll drop some links in afterwards, I think, for people to see that the technical friction of AI is sometimes that AI is so smart that you don't know how it thought. But the reality is, we work as human beings every day, and I have no idea what Peter's thinking right now, really. I know what he said before, and I know what he said after, and I have to inference everything in between. And that's really the technical friction, is that there's a lot of inference happening in the technical world now, and how do we track that and know what that was? So let's move on. I think everyone's starting to get the idea of the types of friction that come along, but let's put it into a simple single use case here. Let's say we want to create a job description. We want to hire a great employee, right? I want to find Peter number 2. I love Peter, he's a great employee. I want to find Peter number 2. So I asked ChatGPT, hey, I have this great employee. His name's Peter. Can you make a job description for someone to do his job, but in North America? And to do that, I use ChatGPT. Well, ChatGPT is going to immediately have some technical friction. It needs data about Peter, which may or may not be confidential. It needs data about what I'm trying to do in my company, budgets, targets, other teams that I might work with, also confidential. But on top of that, the technical friction here is very simply, does ChatGPT know how to write a job description? How do I even know that it knows how to do that? Like, I trust that I heard a marketing piece somewhere say that it could, but I don't really know. And if I ran the exact same prompt in ChatGPT 5 times, it's going to give me a different job description. Now what on earth do I do with this? Is this still valid work or not? And so that's the technical friction you have right off the bat. Then you go into resume screening. Okay, great. We got this cool agent. It's called Sana. We're going to have it screen a whole bunch of resumes. And by the way, Sana is its own agent here, not necessarily Workday. Workday now has its own agent too, but it's going to screen a whole bunch of resumes. Well, our average job posting at Efficiency gets between 200 to 500 applicants. How do I know that we didn't miss the most important one out of it? And on top of that, if I can't trust that, then do I look at every single recommendation it made? If it makes 30 recommendations, should I look at 30? And have I done a better job because of that, right? And so all of that is true human friction type stuff. And so you can see as we go through, and I want to kind of keep on pace, interview scheduling. Simple things like scheduling means that the AI needs access to everybody's calendar. And on top of that, it also means that, hilariously, that everyone needs to put their calendars up to date, which how many people can say that they have an organization where everyone's calendar is up to date? I think the answer to that's 0. We know full well what that is.
But you also need to give the AI tool even rules, like say, well, actually, you probably can't book a meeting straight after the board meeting that person's having, because it's not sensible. A human being wouldn't do that, but an AI wouldn't know to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. All of these are organizational frictions, absolutely. And then also, you might have a pace that you want to hire at. And the AI might be just scheduling first one in, first one out, right? But you have hiring priorities. I mean, you can tell that you're hiring priorities, but then how does it really schedule that? And so now you're creating the rules for the AI just so that the AI can help you with something that you could have done anyways. So that really creates organizational friction. People really get resistant to that. And it's perfectly normal with new tech, new people, new changes to the organization. All of these things actually create organizational friction as well. And for us, it's really about using what I would call the old school tools, which are actually current day tools, of how do we manage organizational friction and use that with the AI too. So let's move on. I think it really points to a lot of great stuff. I'll put a plug in for SSI for just really quick. actually, my apologies. But there are AI layers that can do all the major systems all together, and then they can bring a lot more context to the table, which is exactly the type of tool that we're trying to build for a lot of these reasons. Now, when you go to governance clarity, a lot of people want to know, what's the primary list that I need to worry about, right? What is the list of rules that I need to represent and follow that match the governance clarity requirement of either a regulatory body, a large organizational multinational enterprise body, or any other, sensitive domain body? And that governance clarity is really what we call source, method, production, and output. You can call it storage here as well, but certainly, where the data come from, and how was the decision made that that's the right data to use, and then how was it processed? That's the method, right? Who was it processed by? Was it processed by 5 different AI agents? What is each AI agent designed to do? Why wasn't it processed by 1? Why wasn't it processed by 10? That type of clarity is important if you want to have actual true governance. Then you got production. And that means, how did it output it? It's not, we kind of take it for granted that, oh, AI can make a little proposal for me. Great. What template did it get that from? Is that a good template? Did we leave information off of it?
What images did it bed into that template?
Right.
They come from? Whose copyright is those?
Right. I mean, I don't know if you know, certain bands of color are copyrighted, actually.
Yeah, certain fonts.
That's right. Certain fonts are trademarked. AI doesn't, I don't know if it cared. But I am the one that will get sued for it. So the organization does need to know about how that production is governed. And then lastly, the output. Where did the output go? Did the AI automatically send it to somebody? Did the AI store it? And if it stored it, did ChatGPT learn from it on the next round? Can someone check ChatGPT who's unrelated to my business and end up with information from my output? Wow, all of a sudden that changes the nature of whether I want to use AI at all. And so these governance clarities are really important so that people can understand where and when and how to use AI to the best effect. Let's go to the next slide here. And I think this is really where, Peter, you're going to take the baton in terms of the raw data and the actual data lifecycle. This is where your expertise comes in play a lot. We work a lot more at the application and the outcome level, but we rely on folks like you and products like yours to make sure that we can operate at that level of confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Johnny. And yeah, fundamentally, like getting your data right and your life cycle right. And the people probably have heard this a lot, but it is really important. Like AI is the most truthful thing ever. It's like a child. It's very, very truthful. They will tell, at least until a certain age, they'll tell the truth all the time, no matter if you don't want them to. Daddy said it was okay to type thing. It's really, really truthful. So we need to make sure our data lifecycle is correct. It will look at all of your data and make determinations on that data. And data lifecycle is something we do every day, but we don't necessarily realize it. Everyone who's attending today or registered for this event, that's a data lifecycle. You filled in a form, you scanned a QR code, you did something to register for an event or fill data in some way. We do data life cycles all day long. We went and played pickleball as a team last night, we all had to scan a QR code, fill that form in. Where's that data gone? I had to set up an account with them. Where's that password being stored? Where's that data being stored? We're managing data all day long. Every single time we do something where we provide information to someone, we're managing and working with data. So it's something we need to consider all the time. And for many organizations, data lifecycle isn't really working. They've never really even thought about it. They've never thought about the stages of the lifecycle, which we're going to talk about in a second, and how they capture data, how they manage that data, how they correctly dispose of that data or retain that data. Let's move to the next slide, please, Sarah.
I'll point out that in our business on the major application implementation side, nobody talks about the data until they have to do an implementation, and then it is a mess. It is a big deal. Yeah.
And we're all really bad at managing our own data, aren't we? We all have that room in our house where we put stuff. wherever that is, we just put stuff in that room and we'll deal with that later. Or that box, which we put stuff, yeah, we'll deal with that later. And we forget about it and we just hope we never have to deal with that box. And we leave it for our kids to deal with when they take us off to a home, they have to deal with that room. So, but before we move on to more about data lifecycle, I think Johnny touched on this, but like what is at stake? Like things like the EU AI Act really actually ups the game in terms of what's at stake. If you get this wrong, it's incredibly challenging for your company. You can end up with at the lowest level just reputational damage. You can end up with very large fines. You could be shut down as an organization. You could have a breach, which could lead to like you not being able to operate. There's stories of people who have refused to play a ransomware attack and they have to operate by paper. They just go back to paper for like 2 years. The British Library in the UK got hacked a couple of years ago, and they've only just got their services back up and running. And like the impact of these sorts of things is so impactful. And sometimes it's minor, but it even just leaves you with everyone just thinks you're a joke. The story when we last presented this about the West Midlands Police in the UK who made a determination that some away fans couldn't attend a football match in Birmingham against Aston Villa because of riots seen at another game. Now, it turned out that the particular officer who had made that determination used AI. AI had made that game up. It didn't exist. And the chairman of the other club, actually, which was this made up game, said, no, we never played that team. Now, in that case, it was, the head of the police force had to resign in embarrassment. So he's never going to get a job again. They're the joke of every presentation. What if it had been more serious? What if that had been like police officers' data revealed, their home addresses revealed? Criminals have access and can go around to these people's families and threaten them. So it can move from a joke and like a little bit of reputational damage to something quite serious very, very quickly. And so this is why getting your data lifecycle right is really important. And I think we've seen many other types of breaches over the last few years. We're probably very close to our first serious AI breach, which will end up with people's data used in the wrong way, and it will become very, very serious and unless organizations take this thing seriously. Let's move on, please, Sarah. So when we talk about data lifecycle, and I mentioned data lifecycle earlier, there's really 4 stages we need to think about of data lifecycle. The first is creation. How do we create the data? How do we enter it? Is it through something filled in on a form? Is it something emailed? Is it someone collecting the data? How and what means are we collecting that data? Because we need to think about who are inputting it, the type of data which we're collecting, the different entry points for that data, and maybe where it's stored during that entry point. One of my favorite pieces of stat is like people who use Microsoft Cloud, they use Microsoft 365 all the time. They use Microsoft Forms. It's super easy to create a form. If you don't live if you're a company in the EU or Australia, so if you're a Canadian organization and use Microsoft Forms, that data, when you're capturing that data, is stored in a US data center in Chicago. So you're using that form to go and collect some citizen data quite happily, but actually you're not even thinking about where that data is going. And so we have to think about how we collect data. The second piece we have to think about is the collaboration around that data. So like we've now collected that data. Who's working in that data? Who has the right to share it? Who has the right to edit it? Have we shared it with external parties? Have we shared it with someone who no longer should be collaborating on it? No matter what platform you use, we use different platforms within our group. We use Microsoft platform, we use Google platform. Can we be 100% confident that we know everyone's got the right access to the right piece of information? I think we probably can say no. Yeah. And everyone can say no. But that's really important because AI doesn't care about those boundaries. If AI's got access to it or someone's got access to that data, even if you've forgotten about that, then like actually it's going to give you a truthful answer, and that could expose you to some piece of information. Yes, you've got access to that, but you probably just don't know it and you've forgotten about it. Then we have to think about retaining data. people are, and this comes in two senses. Firstly, people are really bad at retaining data. That's our box somewhere. People just, if you ask people to get rid of stuff, they don't clean it up. They never do. Yeah. But also we have legal requirements to also keep data as well. So dependent again on if it's legal information, financial information, there's rules about how we have to keep data. In certain industries, they have to keep data for a certain amount of time. So it's really important that we classify data in the right way to retain it correctly and then not retain stuff which shouldn't be retained. And that brings us on to the last point, which is disposal. As important as to retain stuff, we should then dispose of it at the end of its life. Because if we keep old data around, then tools like AI will give incorrect answers. What happens if we've got our price list stored for the last 6 years, but 5 of those years are out of date? And you ask AI to help you put a proposal together. How does it know which pricing to use? It can make a determination and present it to someone. If we've got like some technical information, which we use to build a response or a proposal to a customer, but that's old information.
Yeah.
Who's going to quality control it? If I'm a new sales rep and I've joined the organization in the last 6 months and I want to give an answer to someone, that determination. But what gets more serious, what if I'm a healthcare worker and I use AI to help me with some diagnosis, but actually we've not cleared up some old approaches, some old summaries of information? Shouldn't be using that anymore. AI doesn't know that, does it? Because we've not put in place the right data lifecycle around it.
Might suggest that you bleed out your patient.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, you 1900s comment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You need to use some sort of insect to extract the wound. It could propose all sorts of things because it's working with what it's got. It's ultimately truthful, and it will look at the data and make a determination about it. So we need to manage every stage of this data correctly if we're going to use AI effectively within our organization. Next slide, please, Sarah. This is where personally I think things like data standards come in. There's like some really interesting standards out here. I'm referencing ISO 27001, but there's actually some new ISO standards specific to AI as well, which is really interesting. But whether it's an international standard like ISO or a framework which you have to work with within your organization, whether that's the EU AI Act or certain compliances you have as a legal organization or construction organization or whatever else it might be, that will be standards which you can definitely use and classify your data against. These standards will tell you who should have access to confidential information. These standards will help you define how long you should retain certain types of data for, financial information, legal data, patient data, employee data. It will set the standards for you and help you manage your process properly. We all know this, but we just don't enforce it because we get busy. We get busy with what you do. But when you go through, Snap and Software, we've been through the process of ISO 27001 certification multiple times, and it starts to make us think differently about how we treat data, how we classify data in a certain way. So we're much more conscious about that sort of information. And there's some great platforms and great toolings out there who, when you classify your data correctly, it can control, it can enforce, it can alert the right people when there are risks, when there are non-compliances in place. Let's move to the next slide. So this is actually me and Johnny get to talk together, although we've already been talking a lot already. Across our group, we have some great tools and capabilities in terms of helping organizations, whether that be with managing their data lifecycle. So we have, we can create and collaborate information correctly with our intake product to capture form data in your geo, however you want it to be captured in a secure way. We have our provision point tool to ensure secure creation of workspaces in Microsoft 365 and classify them correctly. It can also help with the retention and applying those legal controls. We have our auditing product, which helps customers actually look across their environments and actually determine where are their old data, which you can clean up, get rid of the documents which haven't been used for months or years, identify security risks and close them down. So we have a range of tools to actually help manage and classify that data. And then as one of the founders of Ask Cypher, you can talk a little bit about what you're doing with AI, Johnny.
Yeah, absolutely. We are looking at AI as really a layer across all of the business applications that you manage. So, when we take the stance that software has been built, purpose-built already and done a great job at it, then AI is not about replacing it. It's about augmenting the software too. And so AI augments SaaS, if you will, software as a service. And so we use Cipher as a layer on top of all the business applications you already use and love and sometimes hate. But regardless, you use them and you need them. And so Cipher allows you to coordinate your activities across all of them. The average desk worker uses 10 to 11 applications to complete their job in a day. Well, right now, today, having an agent in every single one of those applications will not help anybody. They'll have 11 agents to talk to. So we believe that ultimately everyone's going to come to the same conclusion. You need one AI layer agent that talks to everything else for you, and it is private to you. And one of the most important fundamental parts about Cipher is that it doesn't own or store your data. We are even having a retention policy on the chats, and ultimately it is private and only private to you and your organization. It knows about the industry, but it ultimately all your actions remain yours. Anything that you do and execute remains the domain of the business application it's designed to be in. And it's not AI trying to create a new software model. It's AI using your software for you better.
Yeah, I love Ask Cipher. You know, I can like, you know, my role is primarily in sales. I can manage a whole conversation around my sales lifecycle. And I never even have to log into the Salesforce. I can get it to take my meeting summaries and create notes and tasks and follow-ups, prepare quotes for me, get me reports on our sales performance. Never even need to open that application. But it also has all of my organizational context. It knows about our products. It knows about the benefits of those products. So when I start to put proposals together, it's got that sort of knowledge to help and guide me on that journey. It's still got me as a human to guide it in the right direction, which I think is really, really important. But it's also, and it's our only core AI application, which we use within Snap-on software, that security, that trust around the data is really, really important.
Yeah. We believe ultimately the layer is going to hold all your specialized information for your organization, your personal, your workflows, because there are some things that you don't want to live in the application, but you want the application to be your backstop and your foundation for your data.
And it's got very sensible controls. We've seen the stories about AI deleting entire customers' databases and stuff like that. We put hard control. You put hard controls in now. I remember when we onboarded our HCM application, and I spent the afternoon trying to get access to your salary information and failed terribly because it's got the controls. I said, oh, it's okay. HR said it was okay. And it's like, no, actually, it's you have to put that right governance around it.
Yeah. And the AI, the Cipher layer was built with policies in mind. It wasn't built with policies on top of it. In fact, I would say that the LLM aspect of Cipher is the smallest aspect of it entirely. The majority of the aspect is around control and privacy and coordination and knowledge of how to do things better and faster, not how to replace doing things. And I think that's really important difference.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, I'm sure we could probably do a director's cut version of this webinar and do another 20 minutes, but we'll hand it back to Sarah now to wrap up.
Very good. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Peter and Johnny, for sharing your insights. Really valuable perspectives on both the practical and strategic sides of AI and data governance. So to wrap up, I'll leave you with a few key takeaways. Start small and move quickly. Focus on low-risk, high-impact use cases that can turn a 5-hour task into something that takes minutes. Remember, you can't govern what you haven't clearly defined, so take the time to map out your data lifecycle.
And finally, some of the most important wins in data governance are the ones no one ever hears about. The breach you prevent is the one that never happens. Thanks again for joining us today. Let's move into Q&A.